My name's Sarah Mitchell, a 32-year-old accountant who's been holding my family together for years or so, I thought. For 3 years, I poured my heart and paycheck into a family fund, believing I was keeping my mom and older brother afloat through tough times. I skipped vacations, worked overtime, and tightened my budget to make sure they were okay. But at a family dinner in a packed suburban Chicago restaurant, everything I believed shattered. The table was loud with chatter, relatives catching up forks, clinking, the usual chaos. Then my brother, grinning like he'd won the lottery, let it slip. My mom had tried to pull $1 million from our family fund to hand over to him. $1 million. My money, my sweat, my trust gone in a single sentence. I froze, my fork hovering mid-air as he smirked like it was no big deal. My mom didn't even blink, just kept sipping her wine, acting like I wasn't sitting right there. The air turned, heavy eyes darting to me, waiting for my reaction. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled, stood up, and walked out, leaving them staring at my empty chair. By the next morning, my phone was blowing up, panicked calls, desperate texts, all begging me to fix this. They had no idea what I was about to do. If you're hooked on this family betrayal and want to see how I flipped the script, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. You won't believe what happens next. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. For 3 years, I'd been the one holding my family together, pouring every spare dollar from my accounting job into a family fund I thought was keeping us afloat. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and I believed my mom, Linda Mitchell, and older brother, Brian Mitchell, were struggling, especially Brian with his string of failed business ventures. I was wrong about a lot of things. Growing up in our suburban Chicago home, I always felt like the odd one out. My parents, Linda and Robert Mitchell, had a soft spot for Brian. He was the golden child, charming, always talking big about his next big break. Me, I was the reliable one, the one who got straight A's, went to college, and landed a steady job at a mid-sized accounting firm. But somehow, my efforts never seemed to matter as much. When Brian dropped out of college to chase his dreams, Mom would say, "He's just finding his path, Sarah." When I worked late nights to pass my CPA exam, I got a pat on the back. And, "That's nice, honey." It stung, but I brushed it off. Family's supposed to stick together, right? 3 years ago, things got serious. Brian's latest venture, a sketchy online startup selling fitness gadgets, tanked, leaving him with debts he couldn't pay. He'd call me, voice shaky, saying he was one bad month from losing everything. "Sarah, I just need a little help to get back on my feet," he'd plead. I believed him. He's my brother after all. So I started funneling money into the family fund, a joint account I managed to cover Mom's bills and Brian's so-called emergencies. I'd deposit thousands each month, cutting back on my own expenses. No new clothes, no weekends out, just work and bills. I thought I was saving them. Mom was no better. She'd call me weekly, her voice heavy with worry. "Your brother's trying so hard, Sarah. We can't let him fail." She'd talk about how stressed she was, how she couldn't sleep, knowing Brian was struggling. I felt guilty, like it was my job to fix it. So I kept depositing, managing the fund, like it was my second job. I'd check the balances, track every transaction, make sure the money went to rent, utilities, or Brian's business expenses. At least that's what I thought. The favoritism wasn't new. When we were kids, Brian got the bigger room because he needed space for his ideas. When I wanted to join the school band, Mom said it was too expensive, but Brian got new sneakers for basketball tryouts he never even showed up for. Dad wasn't much different. He'd spend hours talking to Brian about his vision, while I got a nod for bringing home another report card with all A's. Once, when I was 16, I overheard Mom telling Aunt Karen Sarah's fine, she'll always land on her feet. Brian needs us more. That stuck with me. It's why I worked so hard to prove myself to be the one they could count on. But no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. By last year, I was drained. My savings were gone, my social life was non-existent, and I was still getting calls from Mom asking for more. "Brian's got a new investor," she'd say, but he needs a little more to seal the deal. I'd ask for details: what investor, what deal, but she'd dodge, saying, "You wouldn't understand, Sarah, just trust us." Brian was worse. He'd text me things like, "You're my only shot, sis," or "Don't let me down." I kept giving, thinking I was helping my family stay above water. I even took on extra clients at work to cover the fund working weekends, while Brian posted photos of himself at bars, grinning with buddies I didn't know. I ignored the red flags, telling myself he was just blowing off steam. Then there were the little things that didn't add up. Brian's emergencies were vague car repairs, a late rent payment, but I'd see him driving a flashy new SUV. Mom would say the fund was for family expenses, but then she'd mention a new couch or a weekend trip to visit her sister. I'd ask questions, but they'd brush me off. "Don't be so controlling," Sarah, Mom would snap. Controlling, I was the one keeping the lights on. Still, I didn't push too hard. I didn't want to be the bad guy. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they made me feel, like I was never enough. When I got a promotion at work, Mom barely acknowledged it, but when Brian pitched some half-baked idea, she'd rave about how he's going places. Dad would chime in, saying, "Brian's got ambition, Sarah. You should be proud of him." Proud I was the one paying for his mistakes. Once I tried talking to Dad about how unfair it felt. He just shrugged and said, "That's just how families work." I swallowed my frustration, thinking I could change things by being the dependable one. Looking back, I was naive. I thought family meant loyalty, that my sacrifices would mean something. I didn't see how they were playing me, how every dollar I gave was just feeding their entitlement. I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing, that I was the glue holding us together. But that night at the restaurant changed everything. The signs were there, but I didn't want to see them. My whole life, I'd been the dependable one, the one who made things work. As a kid, I was the planner, the problem solver, the one who kept things together. By my late 20s, that meant building a career as an accountant in a mid-sized firm in Chicago. I wasn't chasing fame or fortune, just stability, something my family never seemed to have. My job wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. I crunched numbers, balanced books, and took pride in being good at it. By 32, I was a senior accountant managing clients who trusted me to keep their finances tight. That same instinct drove me to manage our family fund, the one I thought was keeping Mom and my brother from falling apart. The fund wasn't just a bank account, it was my lifeline to them. I'd deposit thousands each month, sometimes 10 grand in a single year, to cover Mom's mortgage, her utilities, and whatever my brother claimed he needed. I didn't mind at first. I mean, it's family, right? You help where you can. But over time, their demands grew heavier, like a weight I couldn't shake. Mom would call, her voice sharp, saying, "Sarah, we're counting on you." My brother was worse. He'd send texts at midnight, "Sis, I'm in a bind. Need 500 for a vendor." 500 here, 1,000 there, it added up. I'd cut my grocery budget, skip dinners out just to keep the fund full. I thought I was doing the right thing. My career was the only thing keeping me sane. I'd throw myself into work, staying late to finish audits or taking on extra clients to boost my paycheck. My boss, Karen, noticed. "You're a machine, Sarah," she'd say. Half impressed, half worried. I'd smile and shrug it off, but the truth was, I needed the money. Every extra dollar went to the fund, to Mom's endless bills, or my brother's so-called emergencies. I didn't tell anyone at work about it, not even Jessica Carter, my closest friend at the firm. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to keep things together. But then the cracks started showing. About a year ago, my brother's requests got more frequent, more vague. He'd call sounding frantic, saying he needed money for a business deal. What deal, I'd ask. "It's complicated, Sarah." He'd snap like I was too dumb to get it. He was working on some new project, an app, a startup, something about crypto. It was always changing, always the next big thing. I'd press for details, but he'd dodge, saying, "Just trust me, sis." Trust him, I wanted to, but the numbers weren't adding up. I'd check the fund's transactions and see withdrawals. I couldn't explain $2,000 for consulting fees, $3,000 for equipment. When I asked Mom, she'd say, "It's for your brother's future, Sarah." Don't be so nosy. Nosy, I was the one funding their future. I started digging deeper, checking bank statements late at night, trying to piece it together. One time, I found a transfer of $4,000 to an account I didn't recognize. I called Mom about it. "Oh, that's for Brian's new venture," she said, casual as anything. What venture I pushed? She sighed like I was exhausting her. "You wouldn't understand, Sarah. He's under a lot of pressure." Pressure? I was the one working 60-hour weeks to keep them afloat. I started to feel like a fool, but I didn't stop helping. I couldn't. They were family. The worst was when I tried talking to Dad. I thought maybe he'd see my side, understand how unfair it felt. I drove to their house one Sunday, sat him down, and laid it out. How I was burning out, how Brian's requests didn't make sense. He barely looked up from his newspaper. "Your brother's trying to make something of himself," he said. "You've got a good job, Sarah. You can handle it." Handle it, I was drowning. I left that day feeling smaller than ever, like my work, my sacrifices meant nothing. Then came the red flags I couldn't ignore. Brian showed up to a family barbecue last summer in a brand new leather jacket, bragging about a business trip to Vegas. Vegas. With what money, I asked Mom later, and she brushed it off. "He's networking, Sarah. It's how business works." Networking, I'd seen the funds balance dip lower than it should have, but I didn't have proof yet. I started keeping a closer eye, logging every withdrawal, every excuse. Brian's texts got bolder. "Need 10 grand for a new investor meeting." It's a sure thing. 10 grand, I told him. I'd need to see a business plan first. He laughed it off. "Come on, Sarah, don't be like that." Like what? The only one keeping us above water, Jessica noticed something was off. We'd grab coffee during lunch breaks, and she'd ask why I looked so stressed. I didn't tell her everything, just that family stuff was weighing me down. "You're too good to them," she said once, shaking her head. She was right, but I didn't want to hear it. I kept telling myself I could handle it, that I had to. But deep down, I was starting to wonder if I was being played. I just didn't know how bad it was until that dinner. That dinner was supposed to be a simple family reunion. We hadn't all sat down together in months, so I thought it'd be a chance to reconnect. Instead, it turned into the moment everything fell apart. We were at a busy diner off the highway in suburban Chicago, the kind of place with vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner. The table was packed: me, Mom, Dad, my brother, Aunt Karen, Cousin David, and a few others, all talking over each other. I was trying to keep up, nodding along to Aunt Karen's stories about her new dog, when my brother leaned back in his chair, grinning like he'd just pulled off a heist. So he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Mom's hooking me up big time for my new project. $1 million from the fund to seal the deal." I froze my fork halfway to my mouth. $1 million. From the family fund I'd been pouring my paychecks into for years. My heart started pounding, but I kept my face blank, waiting for him to keep talking. He didn't even look at me, just kept bragging to Cousin David about how this crypto startup was going to make him a fortune. "It's a game changer," he said, smirking like he'd already cashed the check. I turned to Mom, expecting her to correct him, to say it was a mistake. She didn't. She just sat there, swirling her wine glass, avoiding my eyes. "Mom," I said, my voice low but sharp, "what's he talking about?" The table went quiet, all eyes on us. She sighed like I was making a big deal out of nothing. "It's for your brother's future, Sarah," she said. "He needs this to turn his life around." Turn his life around. With my money, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. $1 million, I pressed my hands, gripping the table. "From the fund I manage." Did you think I wouldn't notice? Mom's face tightened, but she didn't back down. "You've always been so good with money, Sarah," she said, her tone patronizing. "Brian needs this chance. It's an investment, not a handout." An investment? I wanted to laugh. Brian's last 3 investments had crashed and burned, leaving me to clean up the mess. I turned to him, hoping he'd at least look ashamed. He didn't. He just leaned back, arms crossed, that smug smirk still on his face. "Chill, sis," he said. "It's not like you're broke." That smirk broke something in me. All those years of skipped vacations, late nights at work, scraping by to keep the fund full, it hit me like a punch. "You're joking, right?" I said, my voice rising. "I've been killing myself to keep you afloat, and you think you can just take $1 million without asking me?" Brian shrugged like it was no big deal. "You're overreacting," he said. "Mom said it was fine." I turned to Dad, hoping he'd say something, anything to back me up. He just stared at his plate, mumbling, "Let's not ruin dinner, Sarah." Ruin dinner. They were ruining my life. I looked around the table. Aunt Karen looked uncomfortable. Cousin David was checking his phone, and Mom was glaring at me like I was the problem. That's when I knew they'd never seen me as anything but a cash machine. I stood up my chair, scraping the floor. "You tried to take $1 million behind my back," I said, staring at Mom. "My money, my work, my trust. And you." I turned to Brian, my voice shaking with rage. "You think you can smirk your way out of this?" Mom tried to interrupt, her voice sharp. "Sarah, sit down. You're embarrassing us." Embarrassing them, I was done. "I'm locking the fund," I said loud enough for the whole table to hear. "No one touches it. Not you, Mom. Not you, Brian. And I'm done bailing you out." Brian's smirk finally dropped, his face going pale. Mom slammed her glass down, spilling wine. "How dare you?" she snapped. "After everything we've done for you." Done for me, I almost laughed. All I could see was years of their entitlement, their excuses, their lies. I grabbed my purse, my hands trembling, but my mind clear. "You'll regret this," Brian muttered, but I didn't look back. I walked out of that diner, past the stunned faces of my family, into the cool night air. They thought they could play me, but I was done being their doormat. Walking away from that diner felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for years. I'd had enough of being their ATM, and I wasn't going to let them touch another cent of my money. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing, missed calls from Mom, texts from Dad, and a voicemail from Brian that I didn't even bother to check. I knew what was coming, but I wasn't backing down. First thing I did was log into the family fund's online banking portal. My hands were still shaking from the confrontation, but my mind was clear. I changed the password, added 2-factor authentication, and froze all transactions. No one could touch that account. Not Mom, not Brian, not even Dad. The fund had over $1 million, most of it from my paychecks, and I wasn't going to let them drain it for Brian's latest pipe dream. Next, I called my bank's after-hours line and set up a meeting for the next morning to transfer my contributions to a new private account. I was done funding their lives. Then I sent a group text to Mom, Dad, and Brian. "The fund is locked. I'm done paying for you. Don't ask again." I hit send and turned off my phone. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control, but I knew they wouldn't let it go that easily. By morning, my inbox was a war zone. Mom had left 3 voicemails, her voice dripping with guilt trips. "Sarah, how could you do this to us?" she said in the first one. "You're being so selfish, cutting us off like this. Selfish, I'd given them everything for years." The second voicemail was sharper. "You're tearing this family apart, Sarah. Call me back right now." The third was just her crying, saying, "I raised you better than this." I didn't call back. I'd heard her sob stories before, and I wasn't falling for them anymore. Dad's texts were no better. "You're overreacting," he wrote. "We need to talk this out as a family." Talk it out. He'd sat there at the diner, silent, while Mom and Brian tried to take $1 million behind my back. His next message hit harder. "You're letting your brother down when he needs you most." That one stung, but I wasn't surprised. Dad always took Brian's side no matter what. I didn't reply. Brian's response was the worst. He didn't call, he sent a single text. "You'll regret this, Sarah. I'll make sure of it." It wasn't the first time he'd tried to intimidate me, but it still sent a chill down my spine. I remembered the times he'd lash out as a kid, breaking things when he didn't get his way. But I wasn't a scared teenager anymore. I saved the text just in case I needed evidence later and moved on. I needed to clear my head, so I called Jessica Carter, my best friend from work. We'd been close for years, ever since we bonded over late-night audits and bad office coffee. I hadn't told her much about my family drama before, but now I needed someone to talk to. I met her at a coffee shop near the office, one of those cozy spots with mismatched chairs and overpriced lattes. I laid it all out. Brian's smug reveal at dinner, Mom's betrayal, the $1 million they tried to take, and my decision to lock the fund. Jessica listened, her eyes widening with every detail. "Sarah, they've been using you," she said, stirring her coffee. "You've been carrying them for years, and they think it's their right." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anger. She was saying what I'd been too afraid to admit. "What they did is messed up," she went on. "Trying to take that kind of money without telling you. That's not family, that's theft." I asked her what I should do next. "Protect yourself," she said firmly. "You've already locked the account, which is smart. But they're not going to stop. People like that don't just give up." She suggested I talk to a lawyer just to understand my rights with the fund and keep records of every call and text. "If Brian's threatening you, you need proof," she said, "and don't let them guilt you into backing down. You're not the bad guy here." Her words grounded me. I'd spent so long feeling responsible for their problems, but Jessica was right. I wasn't the one who'd crossed the line. They had. I thanked her and promised to keep her updated. Driving home, I felt a strange mix of calm and dread. I'd taken the first step, but I knew the fight wasn't over. Mom, Dad, and Brian weren't going to let go of that money without a battle. Cutting them off was just the beginning. After I locked the family fund, the consequences hit Brian, Mom, and Dad like a freight train, and I wasn't surprised. They'd been leaning on me for so long, they'd forgotten how to stand on their own. Brian's big crypto startup, the one he thought would make him a millionaire, crashed hard. I heard from cousin David a few weeks later that Brian's investors pulled out when he couldn't come up with the cash to keep the project going. Without the $1 million he'd expected from the fund, he was scrambling. By the end of the month, his flashy SUV was gone, sold to cover a chunk of his debts. David said Brian was borrowing money from anyone who'd listen, even pawning his designer watches to stay afloat. I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd spent years living off my hard work, acting like he was entitled to it. Now he was learning what it felt like to hustle for himself. Mom and Dad weren't doing much better. They'd relied on my deposits to the family fund to cover their mortgage, car payments, and daily expenses. Without my money, their lifestyle started to crumble. Mom called me one day saying they couldn't pay the electric bill. "Sarah, we're in trouble," she pleaded, her voice shaky. "You need to help us." I didn't pick up. I'd heard enough of her guilt trips. Dad sent an email, all formal and stiff, saying they were disappointed in my decision to cut them off. Disappointed? They'd tried to take $1 million behind my back. I marked the email as spam and moved on. They kept trying to reach me. Texts, voicemails, even a letter mailed to my apartment. Mom's messages got more desperate. "We're your family, Sarah. How can you abandon us?" Dad's were colder. "You're making a big mistake." Brian sent another text, less threatening this time, but still dripping with entitlement. "Come on, sis, just open the fund. We're all struggling." I didn't respond. I'd spent years answering their calls, fixing their problems, and I was done. Every time my phone buzzed, I let it go to voicemail. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. Jessica was my rock through it all. After our coffee shop talk, she didn't just offer advice, she jumped in to help me protect myself. She'd dealt with messy family situations before and knew how people like Mom could twist things. "They're not going to stop," she warned me one evening over pizza at her place. "They'll try something else. Guilt lies may be worse." She was right. I'd already saved Brian's threatening text from the day after the diner, but Jessica pushed me to dig deeper. "You need proof of what they've done," she said. "If they come after you, you have to be ready." We started going through the family fund's records together. I'd managed the account for years, so I had access to every transaction. Jessica helped me pull statements going back 3 years, and what we found made my stomach turn. There were transfers I hadn't approved: $5,000 to an account in Brian's name, $2,000 for consulting fees to some company I'd never heard of. Mom had made withdrawals too labeled as household expenses, but they lined up with trips and purchases she'd never mentioned. It wasn't just carelessness, it was deliberate. They'd been siphoning money from the fund, knowing I'd cover the shortfall. Jessica suggested we meet with a lawyer friend of hers, someone who specialized in financial disputes. Over lunch at a deli near the office, the lawyer Mark explained my options. "You've got a strong case if they try to challenge you," he said, flipping through the statements we'd brought. "The fund's in your name and you've got proof of their unauthorized withdrawals. Keep everything texts, emails, voicemails. It's your shield." He also suggested I file a formal notice with the bank documenting their attempts to access the fund without permission. I followed his advice, sending the notice that same week. Back at home, I kept a folder with every piece of evidence: screenshots of Brian's texts, recordings of Mom's voicemails, Dad's emails, and the bank statements. Jessica checked in regularly, making sure I wasn't letting their messages get to me. "They're desperate because they're losing control," she said during one of our calls. "You're doing the right thing." Her support kept me steady, especially when I heard from Aunt Karen that Mom was telling relatives I'd stolen the family fund. Stolen, I'd built it. But I wasn't surprised. Mom always had a knack for playing the victim. I knew this wasn't the end. People like Mom and Brian don't give up when they're backed into a corner. Jessica and I were already preparing for whatever they'd try next, whether it was more guilt trips or something uglier. I wasn't going to let them catch me off guard again. I thought cutting them off would make them back off, but I was wrong. Mom and Brian didn't just accept their new reality. They doubled down, trying to hit me where it hurt most. It started with whispers, then lies, and then an attack I never saw coming. About a month after I locked the family fund, I noticed strange messages popping up in a local Chicago community forum online, one of those early internet groups where neighbors swapped gossip and recipes. Mom had posted under a thinly veiled username "Concerned Parents" before, claiming her ungrateful daughter had abandoned her family and left them struggling to survive. She didn't name me outright, but the details were unmistakable. She controls our family's money and cut us off without warning. The post had dozens of replies, some calling the daughter heartless, others offering sympathy to concerned parents. 34. I read it at my desk, my stomach twisting. This was low even for Mom. I showed the post to Jessica over lunch at our usual deli. She shook her head, her jaw tight. "This is classic manipulation," she said. "She's trying to paint you as the villain to save face." Jessica had been helping me keep records of Mom's and Brian's antics, and she urged me to screenshot the post before it spread further. "People believe this kind of drama," she warned. "You need to stay ahead of it." I saved the screenshots, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Mom wasn't just mad, she was trying to ruin my reputation. Then things got worse. One morning, my boss Karen called me into her office. I'd been at the accounting firm for years, and Karen had always trusted me. But that day, her face was serious. "Sarah, we got a complaint," she said, sliding a letter across her desk. It was anonymous, accusing me of mishandling client funds and abusing a family trust. The letter claimed I'd siphoned money for personal use, putting the firm's reputation at risk. I knew instantly it was Brian. No one else would twist the truth like that, using my work on the family fund to make me look like a crook. I felt my face burn, but I kept my voice steady. "This is about my family," I told Karen. "I've been managing a family fund for years, and they're upset because I stopped funding their expenses." I showed her the bank statements Jessica and I had organized, proving every deposit came from my paychecks, and detailing the unauthorized withdrawals Mom and Brian had made. I even showed her Brian's threatening text from weeks ago, the one saying I'd regret cutting them off. Karen listened, her expression softening. "I believe you, Sarah," she said finally. "This sounds personal, not professional. You're one of our best. We'll handle this." By the end of the day, she'd dismissed the complaint as baseless, but I was still shaken. Brian hadn't just crossed a line, he'd tried to destroy my career. The rumors didn't stay online. Aunt Karen called me one evening, her voice hesitant. "Sarah, I saw something online about you and your mom," she said. "Is it true you cut them off completely?" I could hear the doubt in her voice, and it hurt. Before I could answer, Cousin David texted me. "What's going on with you and Aunt Linda? People are talking." I realized Mom's post was spreading to our extended family, twisting the story to make me the bad guy. I wasn't going to let her lies take root. I drafted a group text to Aunt Karen, Cousin David, and a few other relatives who'd reached out. I kept it short but clear. Mom and Brian tried to take $1 million from the family fund without my permission. I locked it to protect my money. They're spreading lies because I stopped bailing them out. I have proof of everything. I attached a screenshot of Mom's forum post and one of Brian's texts, just enough to show I wasn't making it up. Aunt Karen called back right away, apologizing. "I didn't know the whole story," she said. "Your mom made it sound like you turned your back on them." David texted later. "That's messed up, Sarah. I'm on your side." Their support felt like a small victory, but I knew Mom and Brian weren't done. Jessica was ready for the next move. "They're escalating because they're desperate," she said when we met at her apartment to go over the evidence. She'd help me organize a timeline of every shady transaction, every call, every text. "If they keep this up, you might need to take legal action," she said. I nodded, grateful for her clarity. Mom and Brian thought they could break me with lies, but I was ready to fight back with the truth. I'd fought long enough to reclaim my life, and I wasn't going back. After the lies, the betrayal, and their attempts to tear me down, I decided it was time to build something for myself. I stayed in Chicago, the city I'd always loved, and took a leap I'd been too scared to try before. With Jessica's encouragement, I left my job at the accounting firm and started my own small bookkeeping business. It was just me, a rented office space downtown, and a handful of clients at first, but it felt like freedom. For the first time, my money, my time, my energy, they were mine to control. Starting over wasn't easy. I spent long nights setting up my website, pitching to small businesses, and learning how to market myself. But every late night felt worth it because I wasn't pouring my earnings into a family fund that never gave back. My clients were local shops, a few restaurants, even a startup run by a woman I'd met at a networking event. They trusted me, valued my work, and paid on time, things I'd never gotten from Mom, Dad, or Brian. Jessica was my biggest cheerleader, stopping by with coffee to help me brainstorm, or just to make me laugh when the stress piled up. "You're killing it, Sarah," she'd say, and I started to believe her. Cutting off Mom, Dad, and Brian was the hardest part, but it was final. I blocked their numbers, filtered their emails to a separate folder I never checked, and stopped responding to their messages. The last I heard from Mom was a handwritten note slipped under my apartment door, begging me to reconsider and put family first. I tossed it in the trash. Dad sent one last text saying I was breaking his heart. I didn't reply. Brian didn't even try. He'd burned that bridge with his threats and lies. I wasn't cruel about it. I just didn't have room for their drama anymore. My life was finally my own. The extended family saw things my way. After I sent that group text to Aunt Karen, Cousin David, and a few others explaining how Mom and Brian tried to take $1 million and spread lies about me, the tide turned. Aunt Karen called to say she was proud of me for standing up for myself. "Your mom's been telling stories for years," she admitted. I should have seen it sooner. David invited me to his place for a barbecue, making it clear he wanted no part of Mom's gossip. Other relatives reached out too, cousins, an uncle, even a great-aunt I hadn't seen in years. They didn't need all the details. They just needed to know I wasn't the villain Mom made me out to be. Their support meant everything, especially when I learned Mom and Brian were struggling to keep their social circle intact. Without my money, Mom, Dad, and Brian were on their own, and it showed. Cousin David mentioned that Mom had stopped hosting her usual holiday dinners, probably because she couldn't afford the lavish spreads she used to put on. Brian was spotted working odd jobs, delivery, bartending, nothing like the high-flying entrepreneur he'd claimed to be. Dad kept to himself, too embarrassed to face relatives after the truth came out. They'd built their lives on my sacrifices, and when I stopped carrying them, they couldn't keep up the facade. The family gossip mill once Mom's weapon turned against them. Relatives stopped inviting them to gatherings, tired of their complaints and excuses. They were the ones isolated now, not me. Looking back, I learned something I wished I'd known years ago. Family doesn't mean you owe them everything. I'd spent so long feeling responsible for Mom, Dad, and Brian, thinking it was my job to fix their problems. But responsibility isn't a one-way street. They took my loyalty, my money, my trust, and used it against me. Setting boundaries wasn't just about saying no, it was about valuing myself enough to walk away from people who didn't. I wasn't heartless, I was human. And I deserved a life where I wasn't someone's safety net. My business grew steadily, one client at a time. I moved into a small apartment in a better part of Chicago with a view of the skyline that made every tough day worth it. I started hiking on weekends, something I'd never had time for when I was funding their lives. Jessica and I planned a trip to the Rockies, just the two of us, to celebrate my first year as my own boss. I wasn't rich, but I was free to build, to dream, to live without the weight of their expectations. That was worth more than $1 million ever could be.